By now, many of us have seen this article that was published by BBC News, and this is the perfect example of why it is so important to look at the original source rather than getting information from media outlets. This article title is not necessarily wrong, but it's excluding a ton of important information. But nuanced titles aren't sexy, and clickbait like this will get more people reading. Because if you're like me and you see this, you're like, that does not make any sense. I need to read on to see what they're talking about. So if you go to the actual article that the BBC article was referencing, you don't even have to get past the abstract to see that the authors of this study say to interpret the results with caution. Let's dig a little deeper and see why. So first of all but one study had data only collected in 2020. So none of this information is past 2020 other than one study that had some results from 2021. Also, very few studies, only 3, included information from multiple time points in 2020. Additionally, as you can see, only 2% of studies were from lower middle income countries and none from low income countries. And right here, it indicates that none of these studies were solely focused on children. So across all of these studies, the researchers did conclude for general mental health, which isn't clearly defined here, but they only looked at general mental health, anxiety, and depression. The change in mental health symptoms was not significant for the general population. But if we look further, we see a small significant worsening of general mental health was observed for women and females, as well as a small to medium significant worsening for parents. There are many other things about this study I could cover, but the main takeaway is that the results of this study are not generalizable to the vast majority of individuals, especially if you hold any marginalized status. Additionally, the authors only looked at general mental health, which wasn't really defined, as well as anxiety and depression. So it's not looking at other clinical diagnoses such as eating disorders, for example, or other mental health symptoms such as loneliness or isolation that doesn't necessarily meet clinical criteria for a mental health disorder. At this point, we have also been in the pandemic for 3 years, and we do not have longitudinal data at this point to see how being in a pandemic for 3 years is impacting our mental health, because all this data came from 2020 or early 2021. There are also plenty of other studies that do show a worsening of mental health, including this one, this one, this one, and this one. So if your mental health has been negatively impacted by the pandemic, know that you are not alone and take that BBC article with a grain of salt.